Welcome, everyone. This is our Souls Speak. We're in constellation in divine space. We convene with our souls to listen, share, and explore. Welcome to this episode of our Souls Speak. I'm very honored to introduce our guest for today, Alykhan Tharani. Welcome, Alykhan.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
So you were brought up in the former Belgian Congo in Central Africa in the mid 1960s, and at a very young age found poverty and inequalities of the wealth divide hard to accept. Your parents always helped the poor, and if anyone needed help to start a business, to create their own wealth, they would fund them for this. They taught him, or you, that we are all equal and all children of God, and gave you and your siblings a more spiritual upbringing than one of religion. You had a profound, life transforming spiritual experience at the age of 13, which we'll talk about in a moment, while visiting Egypt with your mom. And then understood on a deep level that there was a lot more to this life than the 3D physical world we live in. You met representatives of major religions to find out why poverty existed. None of these encounters gave you any clear answers. Then, when you found out about light, God's divine plan, and the complex aspect of karma, you finally understood poverty better. And this made you determined to do something to help the impoverished, to have more abundance with a better understanding of karma. Quite an impressive introduction, if I do say so myself. What I want to start with in your interview, and welcome again, Ali, is the story you told me about being a child and seeing colored glass and what that was like for you and how you tried to understand that through telling your parents.
Yes, well remembered, Greg. So, ever since I could speak, I must have been two, three, I can't remember. I just, said to my parents, I was living and working in God's garden, growing colored ice. I didn't know how to say crystals. So I was saying, I lived in God's garden, I worked and grew colored ice, and I was told to be born and didn't want to come to this place. I mean, I just didn't have the vocabulary to say crystals, and I still vividly remember where I was. And it was almost like I was told it's time to be born, which was quite traumatic for me because I was so comfortable where I was.
Yeah, and so also let's lead into that story about how, as you became a little bit older, you experienced a disease that propelled you on your journey to what we're going to talk about today, your topic, activating water, transforming poverty into abundance. Can you tell me?
Yeah. So around 2000, I mean, I was an IT contractor for the UK government for the schools and educations department. I loved IT. And at that time, I bought a filter system, which I was told was one of the best filter systems to buy. And then after about a year, I became really unwell, unable to walk. I mean, the severe pains that I had was unbelievable. It was almost like the most painful thing I've ever experienced. And I just so happened to be at a medical conference, not because I'm medical in any way. I was helping to translate this conference in Luxembourg from French into English. And I met there one of my friends. He's a doctor, cancer research doctor. And he looked at me and he asked me what's happening. And I told him about the situation. And then the first question was, what kind of water are you drinking? And I said, I'm drinking the best water. It's the best, filtered water. And he told me straight away, this water is killing you. And that was quite shocking because until then, for about 2 to 3 years, the doctors could not find anything wrong. There was they couldn't find what it was. They told me you'll be wheelchair bound in 2 years' time. And I thought, I'm not going to accept that. So this was a very important thing when I discussed with him the type of filter system that I had. And he told me about water activation. He told me about ceramics and so on and so on. And when I turned to following his advice, within about 10 days, my symptoms completely changed and I couldn't believe it. And it was interesting because for all that time, I sort of thought, was this a curse? But it wasn't a curse. It was the biggest blessing from God. It really was a way of pushing me, nudging me. I'm a Taurus, very stubborn person. It was almost like pushing me right in the direction that I needed to go. And then I quickly realized that, one water can take away your life force and the other one can give you energy and life. And so that's when my direction changed. And I realized that the system that I was using is so rampant, it's used everywhere in the world. And I wondered if a lot of the world health issues were not connected to this technology. I didn't know. So I think that was an incredible way to be led into that direction without sort of thinking I must do this. But interestingly, the technology that we ended up developing and using for the agriculture and the different health benefits of this type of water, we incorporated ceramics. And I had not even realized consciously. It was until one person said to me, who knew my experience at birth, said, "You're using crystals." And I thought, that's just absolutely incredible. I had not connected it, consciously. So it was almost like possibly using a past knowledge, experience of crystals to do what I was meant to do in this lifetime. Interestingly, while before I met this doctor, I went to do some training with this doctor called Harry Oldfield. He's a famous man. He developed hip photography where he could show the invisible world. You could see the chakras. You could see energy meridians. It was incredible. He's sadly passed on in 2019. He passed away. But I did this course with him. It was called electrocrystal therapy. Lo and behold, this is before I got involved in the ceramics and everything. And I went to him, and one night before the third level class, I went to sleep and I just saw in the most vivid way Harry Oldfield, all the people in my class. I felt intense love for everyone. I just knew he had come back. And Harry Oldfield was a teacher of ancient crystal technology, what I saw. And I just knew why I was at that course. I went the next day and Harry looked at me and he said, "Now you know who I am." And that was it. So it was absolutely incredible. This is, again, before this doctor encounter in Luxembourg. So I could see I was heading towards the crystal healing things. Later on, he did a scan on me to check my energy field. And he said to me, your energy field is so strong, you don't need to do healing with crystals, my method. And I'll go back to what I had discovered after, searching religions and finding light, why I had managed to have this kind of frequency energy, which I'll discuss a bit later. But it was quite an incredible journey to get to that point where I was told you don't need to do crystal healing. Just do what you're doing. It's fine.
That's beautiful. What's coming up for me right now to ask you is just how you felt inside when you made that connection of possibly your feeling uncomfortable to be on this planet and then finding why you were meant to be here. What that
Yes. It's so interesting. It was my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and my sister showed a photograph of me, and I was sulking. And I'll tell you something. My childhood, I was sulking. I was really not happy to be on this planet. I was really not happy. It's almost like being put into a scuba diving outfit and being in the middle of the ocean and thinking, look, I miss the air. That's what it felt like. And I always loved nature. I always loved to connect to earth. It was always my thing. And I remember late 70s, mid 70s, early 70s, when the Idi Amin crisis happened, we were brought to the UK. My parents had moved to Uganda from the Congo, and having to live in a city for me was like, I literally said to God, have I gone to hell? Why have you brought me here? I missed Africa. I lived, for me, that was just so my happy place. So it was really hard training. And I just felt, this sulk became even worse for me. Fortunately, after a few years, my parents went back to the Congo. The reason my parents had left the Congo is that my parents, as I said, they used to do a lot of charity. They used to help a lot of people. And this was not good for the former Belgium colonists. They didn't like that aspect of my parents. So, my dad had to leave the country because there were mercenaries, all sorts of things behind him to try and stop the good he was trying to do. So earlier age, I understood about the powers that be that are not happy with good things. We were victims of that. We had to leave Africa, but fortunately, I was able to go back to the Congo, and I went to an American high school. And boy, oh boy, I loved it so much. It was, I think, the best thing that happened to me. It actually took my sulk away. It brought me happiness. Going to school in the UK was for me, I couldn't believe that. For me, it was like a prison. I felt, why am I in this place? I felt I knew more than what the teacher was saying. And if they were saying something that was incoherent, I would just say, go. That was my experience. So the sulk went away when I got to the American high school in Kinshasa, in the Congo, and I fell in love with education. I fell in love because my teachers, they would sit by me and they would say, you don't get this algebra equation, you don't get this geometry. They would explain to me, not make me feel like a stupid person, but help me. And then I fell in love with earth sciences. The teacher was telling me about clouds, crystals, how rock formations. It was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I couldn't believe that there were weekends. So I literally, my sulk, I think that was the great catalyst for me to not sulk and be happy in this planet. This teacher, I still remember dearly because this teacher gave me a lot of hope when I understood plate tectonics, volcanoes, weathers, clouds. It was, now I realize. And it was just incredible for me. So, yes, that's what allowed me to come to this planet and sort of smile and be happy.
You took it very far from there. You transformed your illness into health and you developed a company. Can you tell us kind of
Yes.
what that?
So, I really, especially after speaking to my doctor friend, I also have another Norwegian friend who's very, important in my life. And he told me about Victor Schauberger vortexing. I had no idea about any of that. Studied this, and we found a company in Japan that could produce vortex devices for us and incorporate it with ceramics. Didn't have any factory or anything like that. It was very new. And they developed a triple vortex for us, and we were, doing really well. But for me, the triple was, I just felt it was not the 100% where I wanted to be. And then during that time, I met up with Dr. Masaru Emoto, the Japanese man you may know, talked about memory in water. And we wanted to develop a quadruple vortex. Quad. You can see it there. And for me, the quad was very important. It's almost like, it looks like four corners. And for me, it was almost a download that we must have quad to create this four energy movements inside the water. And there were certain elements that we wanted to add, certain types of, precious metals. And with the help of, Masaru Emoto, he said, yes, do this and it'll be the perfect way to do it. And then the system was patented. We got the patent very quickly. We did a validation with the university. It was almost 5 years to get the university to validate the technology. to make sure that it was doing what it was supposed to do. The results were the food that we could grow with it had a 3 times higher shelf life. The soil and the plant transpiration was reduced by 33%. The increase in yield went from 20 or 40, we even reached 96% increase in yield. Then the validation showed that the plants were 75% more pest resistant than ordinary plants. And when we analyzed the nutrient content in the resulting food, there was much higher nutrient content. And it's interesting because we would have meetings with leaders of African governments, one of them in Kenya as well, there when Dilraj was in Kenya one time. And they were asking about how do we increase GDP? And for us, it was very easy to say, okay, you increase GDP, you grow healthy food with high nutrition, proper minerals. That means you support your immune system. If too many people are sick and dying, they don't contribute to the economy, they don't contribute to the GDP. Therefore, healthy food is the way. We go to organic farms in Kenya and other parts of Africa and let them know that what they were doing is contributing to the well-being of the country. And then they felt motivated. Oh, great. It's not just a job. We're helping with the nation. And to give them a bigger picture is very important because GDP increases when you have people who are full of energy, healthy, contributing to every aspect of society.
Where I feel like I want to guide you now is just around how you receive your downloads and how you choose to act on them. And this is a point where I'd like to have the others join us in this conversation of, you came here, you realized you have a gift from, it seems like somewhere else,
Yes.
and that you're bringing that and anchoring it into this world as service.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for me, I always felt from our parents' upbringing, how can we be useful? How can we help people? And I think this is really important, the best parents to help us not to go the religious route, but the spirituality route. Interesting about the download, how do I describe it? It's almost like ever since I was so young, I've had this voice or a guidance always with me, like always. And I'll give you an example. When I graduated the American high school in Kinshasa in the Congo, I said to my parents, I want to live in Montreal in Canada. And I'd only been there for one weekend a year prior. That was it. I would visit family in Toronto. But when I got to Montreal, I said, this is where I want to live. Something told me that's where I want to live. And I was so happy when I moved and went to college in Montreal because it was almost like I was 17. I turned 17, and 3 days later, I left Congo, went 2 continents away. My mom saying, I'll come and settle you. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I didn't want, mom to come and settle me. I wanted to do it on my own. And I found my place, found my college. But I've always had this inner guidance, inner knowing, and something very powerful that has guided me always. And I trust this inner voice. Every decision I've made, I'll give you one example. I lived in London in the late 1990s. I was already married. I was working for a Japanese company. One morning, I went to work and I said, I handed my notice. I mean, after 7 years working there, I handed in my notice and I wanted to come and live in the country. But I literally did that. I had to give a 3 month notice. And that week, we found the house where we live in now in the countryside. The next day, we found out my wife was pregnant. And the following day, I came to visit the house. We put in an offer. And the day after, I just knew I wanted to study IT. This is before my ceramic days. And I found the course, a course I literally found, so within 3, 4 days, my whole life changed. I don't think my stable character would have done that as a Taurus. But I just knew I had to leave London, and everything changed in 1 week. And I'm still in this house 28 years later, settled because I don't want to move anymore. So though I've always had these kind of guidance and I've always relied on it, it's never led me astray, that I can say.
It's funny Greg asked that question because the question I was going to ask was, how does your soul speak to you? Which,
Yes, it really does speak to me. And I've had a number of experiences, Barry, that have really showed me how if I rely on this voice, it never leads me astray. I've had incredible experiences. Sometimes they're related to health conditions. When they're health condition related,
hmm,
I have to always ask this voice, what was this about? And I'm going to give you an example, quite a personal experience. Just before the lockdown, my daughter, who was, early 20s, she developed ME to the point where she couldn't get out of bed. She had to be showered. She couldn't eat, so on and so on. For someone who graduated university, she was working for her secondary school that she went to, and all of a sudden she couldn't do anything. So it was like, why did this happen? What's going on? And I'll sort of explain about how I found this practice of giving light, through the palm, giving light. And one day I was receiving light and I saw this image about possibly a karmic connection with starvation, farmers starving, my ancestors having to do something with what happened. There was some sort of accountability I could see. And then we decided that, okay, we're going to have a action for apology for whatever we may have done, or my family, my ancestors, whatever they've done. If they caused poverty, starvation, we're trying to grow food. Look at that link there, right? And I realized that there could be some resentment, there could be something going on. So then started to use this experience about, okay, we've tried to do this. And we took certain actions, which I won't say. We did some, behind the scenes actions to show a concrete apology for whatever we have done. And very quickly, my daughter recovered. And I know people who've had ME for 30, 40 years. They've not changed. It's not changed. But I realized that there was some spiritual aspect, karmic aspect to it. And then I was receiving light one day and I said to God, okay, what was this about? And very quickly I knew it was for me to become a more compassionate person. That was it. And as soon as I realized that this thing made me more compassionate, made me come out of myself and to sort of be more altruistic, the condition changed. It was unbelievable. So yes, universe, God used my daughter to teach me a lesson to become more compassionate. And that was the thing. So following these kind of things have been very important to me. This is one example. There've been several. Yeah.
beautiful answer and feeling and seeing so many things in your sharing. Well, could you talk to us about the relationship between water accessing more of our soul's wisdom and genuinely being of service?
Yeah. So, as we've understood, water has memory. We even work with certain hydrogen technologies. And in ancient text, they say water has divinity and so on and so on. But until you experience it technologically, it's a bit hard for people to just grasp some theories. And like hydrogen technology is selective. So, there are certain processes in the body that we need. We call free radicals. Oh, everything free radical is bad. But there are some free radicals that are so important, like nitric oxide is a free radical, but that helps us with our cardiovascular health. If you take certain antioxidants like vitamin C, it will also deplete your nitric oxide. because it's not selective. But hydrogen, it goes to only the reactive oxygen species to neutralize those, but those that the body needs, it doesn't touch. Now, hydrogen is one of the most abundant elements in the universe. Now, who designed that? It's by design. So when we understand, again, the filter technology that I was using has what we call dead water. It was taking away my energy. Whereas if you use the right water, it gives you life force, it feeds the soul. Even our pineal gland has melanin and all sorts of things. There's a lot of liquid there. And if that liquid is contaminated and dirty, I think it's not going to be helpful for your pineal gland to activate and tune into higher frequencies and dimensions. So yeah, so water is essential, and the highest frequency, the better you can achieve your mission, I believe.
What is the highest expression for you as that little boy around what's possible?
Well, what is important is, again, going back to my upbringing, we were told nothing is impossible. That was the most important thing. And seeing, we were so lucky living in an expat community where we celebrated Diwali, Eid, Christmas, Hanukkah. We celebrated everything. And it's your celebration. Everything was us. It was one season or one set of celebrations within the year because we were all collectively together. So when we grew up like this, seeing divisions was very hard for me. And going back to poverty, there was a point where I had this realization. I called it my Buddha moment when I was 16. When I was 16 years old, I had my own car, went to a nightclub. I was drunk, and I got back into our home, which was, we had security guards. This is the way you lived in Africa. It was normal way to live. And I got inside. It's air conditioned. 6 inches separated myself with the people that guarded my house. And I was drunk. I was 16. I was graduating the next year, kind of thing. And I look outside and I look at the guys guarding us, and I thought, what have I done to be this side of the wall? What have I done? I was born in the same country. I speak the same language. And I said, God, what have I done to be in this side of the wall? What has He done to be outside of this wall? So as soon as I saw that, that's when the poverty thing became too hard for me to see. I felt really bad having as opposed to not having. So when I looked at that, and the last year that I stayed in the Congo, when I used to go to school, I used to sit in the back of the car with my eyes closed because I couldn't face poverty. It was too much. When you can't unsee things, that's what it was like. And that's why I said to my mom, please don't come and settle me in Canada. I need to, because I've taken everything for granted. I used to have, driver, cook. It's normal. Dilraj will attest to that. That's normal in Africa. But for me, I couldn't believe that I was so ungrateful or didn't acknowledge what I had. And therefore, when I went to Canada, it was like, I have to do this on my own. I learned to wash my clothes, iron. I had never done any of that. So for me, it was empowering to just iron clothes and be doing things for myself for the first time. It was incredible. And I think, one of the things, Greg, you mentioned about life transforming situation in Egypt. I think that was such an incredible moment. The reason I took my mum to Egypt was at the age of 13, is when my mum, so when I was born, it was during the Congo rebellion. It was killing, fighting. It was unbelievable. I was small, but what they saw was atrocious. The killing was just so shocking. And my mum, and there were 5 of us, 5 siblings, and my mum vowed to God to say, if we survive this, I will, make a special pilgrimage to a holy site in Egypt, just to thank you for sparing my children and my husband and my life. And she also said to God, I will not eat my favorite things like cream, chocolate, and whatever. She let, certain things. She said, I'll not eat until I get to this place. So at the age of 13, my dad says, take mom. And I was not frightened. I was 13. I said, okay, we'll go on the plane. I never felt I needed someone to take me. So I said, okay, mom, let's go. And we got to Cairo and we couldn't get a flight to Aswan. So we had to take a train, 13-hour train. I'm sitting on the train and all of a sudden I see strangers and goats and cows. And I think, are we going to die? All of a sudden, the fright came, which is not normal for me. And I'm looking at that, thinking, and how will I protect mom and everything? And it was dark, it was night, and I saw this very bright star in the sky. It was so bright. And I kept looking at it, and I kept feeling, you're watching over me. Great, thank you so much. I just felt you're watching over me. And this happened throughout that journey until we got to to Aswan, to the hotel. And where it's Elephant Island, Elephantine Island, and there's this tomb there. And we got outside, and I saw that star, this bright object right above there. And within maybe 5 seconds, a big cloud came, and this light just completely disappeared. And I said to the people in the hotel, what was this cloud? They said, oh, we don't get clouds. What was that? So for me, it was almost like something was watching over me, and it showed me exactly where we needed to go. When we got there, it was gone. And that really was a very important lesson, or transforming experience, because I just knew there was something so much bigger than I could see in the 3D world. So that was just incredible. And the amazing thing is we got a flight back, 2 days later, 45-minute flight. And on the plane, the meal they served, my mom got the dessert that she hadn't touched for 13 years. Everyone else got a dessert that was completely unrelated. And I said, Mom, look, this is God saying, have this now. So those kind of experiences, I've had many of those, but that was like at the age of 13 was very important for me to see that there's a lot more to this world than we just see. And we just need to, capture this voice, or capture the voice of God or universe, whatever you want to call it.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Totally resonates. One of the things that's really intriguing me is about the immune response. We put a whole house water purification system in, promptly made us sick. Really would ask if there's more you could say about that, please.
Yeah, good question, Lorna, because, when you say about the water purification, so our process, I'll just explain, is, we had to develop a filter media type that lasts a long time. You mentioned about changing filters regularly. I didn't want people to just dump toxic filters into landfill and make that landfill toxic. So we had to work with, some media that have catalytic effects so that they neutralize and then absorb rather than creating these toxic things to throw away. But the whole point is we physically clean the water, because water it'll have glyphosate. It could have birth control pills, or it could have heaven forbid, Prozac, antidepressants. It's in the water, it circulates. So we want to take away the physical aspect of the water, but, you have the pathogenic frequencies, like in homeopathy, and that can be more powerful. Mm-hmm. So then you need to sort of put a vortex through it, the water through a vortex. And then we have the ceramics that have 86 different minerals. So, they say we need at least, 90 to 100 type of minerals for life to proliferate. And again, there are certain minerals, or even, for example, mercury, that is needed for our DNA to be active. So there's reasons. God doesn't invent mercury to make us sick. There is a reason for it being there, right? So, so we put the ceramics only resonate frequencies. They don't put anything into the water. So we want to make sure that it's not heavy metals or anything. It's not that, to give the resonant frequency so that you then have almost a purified, cleansed, resurrected water to then drink.
Yeah.
And this is something that when we give it to plants, animals, fish, we see incredible results. We've seen, like I said, up to 96% increase in yields. And the food is full of life, because the water is intracellular. The intracellular hydration of the plant tissue is so important. So even for human beings, people say, oh, this person is becoming wrinkly or whatever. It doesn't have to happen. If you have good hydration, our skin doesn't need to wrinkle because our intracellular hydration is high. So that's one aspect that is really, really important. So yeah, and like you're saying, we couldn't find anyone that could do this. We couldn't find anyone that had this kind of system. I'll give you an example. We have a friend that lives in Scotland, and in Scotland, the water is naturally high in pH, and it has high levels of fulvic acid and humic acid. And you think, wow, people buy humic acid and fulvic acid for health. But what do? They chlorinate it. And when you chlorinate fulvic and humic, it becomes the most toxic chemical. So you can call it like a chlorine disinfectant byproduct, DPBA, or you can call it something like a chloramine. Now, when you combine good minerals with chlorine, it becomes 10,000 times more toxic than normal chlorine.
Wow.
Normal chlorine kills things 10,000 times. So it goes into your genetics and causes all sorts of issues. It's a very carcinogenic thing, and it's in the waters. So to take out this kind of contamination, you can't just filter it out. You have to deconstruct it, then absorb it. And that's why we had a company in America develop media for us so that we could bring that, so that you could then say, yes, it does remove, chlorine byproducts, chloramines. Then you can work towards getting healthier.
There's quite a lot in there. I mean, the thing I'm hearing is about the vortex itself.
Yes.
The process of swirling in the vortex is a transformational. I would use the word transformational. Others might say alchemical, but
Yeah.
it actually is. What I'm hearing is that it's to do with the axiotonal, which is center
Yes.
tone, frequency, alignment of the water, because it's been fundamentally changed through the various processes that they use to treat the water. So
yeah, nitric oxide is what gives elasticity to our veins and yeah.
And the final thing was I was given an orchid for Mother's Day, which I've never honestly had any success with orchids, and I dedicated myself to being so kind to this orchid, and it still isn't very happy. And I wonder if it's because I've been moist, what do you call it, humidifying it with distilled water.
Yes. So it's a good question, Lorna. Distilled water. So I'll tell you, when the sun evaporates water, it infuses it with positive ions. And positive ions are from the sun's nuclear thermal energy, which is positive ionization. So drinking distilled water or drinking rainwater, if it's not neutralized, it's not good for us. Your orchid would need some sort of a mineral, at least to have the water not acidic and to have some minerals inside. And some minerals means Celtic salt is incredible. It's got the amazing properties. So something like that. But when you talk about plants, they're very sensitive. And I'll give you an example. Just before I moved to the countryside, where I worked in this Japanese company, they had 2 hydrangea plants that were completely dead. They were literally dead. They were in the bin. And I said to my boss, can I please take these home? And everyone laughed. And they said, are you crazy? They're dead. I said, oh, I don't, if there's any hope, I'll take them. Took them home, and 30 years on, I've got one bush here, one in the garden, which I brought back from London. And they're the most beautiful bushes and plants 30 years on. And, we have a special altar dedicated to the Creator. And in the summer, these flowers are offered to the Creator. I mean, can you imagine? Like, it was in the bin. And I never gave up hope because I knew that these little children will become beautiful bushes again. So they're one in the front garden, one in the back, and they're still living in the most beautiful plants. So yes, it's the intention and the love and how we view life, which is so important. They are so alive. They communicate with us. We just have to listen to them. Plants, trees talk to us. I've had incredible experiences, so many experiences. One time my breathing became so shallow I couldn't breathe. I was thinking, what's going on? Am I having a panic attack? I was receiving, light to my forehead. And all of a sudden I saw this tree talking in the garden. We have a huge apple tree, and this tree was saying, are you going to reduce CO2? Because we're really scared of losing CO2. That's our way to breathe. And I just said, absolutely not. I'm going to make sure that there's no shortage of CO2. I'll make lots of CO2 on your behalf, but we're your allies. And my breathing instantly changed. So those kind of experiences are incredible. I've had so many experiences where nature communicates. And going back to my mum, when I left Africa and went to Canada, I said to Mum, if you miss me, you put your foot on the earth, and I'll put my foot on earth because we're all connected. Mother Earth is our mother and connects us all. And that made her peaceful. She didn't have to think about it. She would go into the garden, put her foot on the earth, and connect straight away. And she would connect. That was it. So yeah, once rainwater does touch earth or does touch a material, neutralizes the positive ionization. Interestingly, Victor Schauberger, who discovered vortexing in the 1800s in Austria, he was saying that deforestation means less negative ions to neutralize rain. And he was saying that if we cut down the trees, this positive ionized water goes into the rivers and the oceans and everything. And he said it'll create havoc in weather because of the positive ions. Really interesting, his observation. And, based on that, we developed a shower head, which creates vast amounts of negative ions, because that's the way to counteract deforestation, lack of trees, too much positive ionization from everything that's going on, including electricity, Wi-Fi, mobile radiation, EMF, etc. Negative ions are just so important. Negative ions are what actually spark the mitochondria to create ATP. Do that. If you live in a city, you're going to get minus 100 negative ions per cubic centimeter. If you go to a mountain or somewhere in lovely mountains, it's minus 70,000. By the ocean, you're going to get 50, 60, 70,000. In Niagara Falls, they recorded 100,000 negative ions. But the shower heads we have now produce 380,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. So it's almost like they've got the vortexing and the ceramics inside, but it's also to make sure that we are doing our bit to replenish the negative ions that's certainly missing in society today. We have a garden hose bit that can go onto a hose. The people who cannot plumb it into the house, they will use a garden type thing. Or there are some people in plant nurseries that will use the shower head to sort of raise the seeds, and they found that the seeds will germinate more, or they'll have more will germinate. So yeah, it can be used in different ways if you can adapt the shower head to be used in a garden. Well, this year is the first year we've had, plants. We had some raised beds put in the garden last year. And I say the plants are amazing. I mean, the radishes are so huge. I can't believe how big they are. We get deer in the garden. And so we had to put raised beds so that not everything is eaten. We got low beds as well. They're welcome to eat that, no problem. But we just need to make sure that some of it can be used for others and, sharing as well.
What do you imagine is possible or could happen if everybody and every being and every creature had access to water that was pure, purified, of this quality?
Oh, that would be such an incredible dream. I think, when we say we want global peace, peace in the world, and so on, it sounds so far-fetched. It sounds so unreachable. I think through water that is, activated, charged, and has the right frequency, we can achieve incredible things together. When a few years ago, there were a lot of stabbings in London. Young people were getting stabbed in London. And that's when I know that there was a lot of hatred, a lot of things going on in the news, in the media. And it's almost like that kind of hatred being swirled around, spread everywhere, and shared in all the sewage and water plants. I could literally see energetically that this is causing the degradation of society because the water was so full of hatred. If the water is full of love and compassion and care because we are in abundance with this, it could create a lot of happiness for cities, communities, and so on.
The articulation of your work and your vision and your love and your kindness is awe-inspiring.
Oh,
and so much here just to learn from and to be aware of, and how much hope and possibility there is, and what a blessing it is for us to have you here.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure. I'm so grateful that you invited me. The world I live in can be quite lonely. Not many people understand this. Not many people can, understand. I mean, from birth till now, it's a long time, And the thing, and again, I was saying to Dilraj, our work attracted the wrong attention, attention from the people who don't want this to be achieved. And things did happen in a way that was trying to stop this side of things. But I'm never going to give up on humanity, never going to give up on why I'm here, because what a waste of time that would be. And I'm not going to let it happen. So it's so wonderful to be able to talk to a community like this so that it gives me a lot of hope that if there are people who resonate and understand this, then we can move forward with, and all this technology that we have, it's not an invention. They're all nature mimicking things. It's to mimic nature. Nature does it so well. We don't need electricity and powerful things and nuclear explosions to do certain things. Nature does it so well. It's been doing it for so long. We just need to package it into a more, distributable form if you don't live near nature, and make it available for people to experience what nature's perfected over eons of time.
Could you share 3 insights, pointers, points of inspiration for us and others to take away from your learning and from your experience?
Yes. For me, like I mentioned, there is a divine plan. There is a divine plan to manifest heaven on earth. And that's the will of the universe. And so when you understand that the highest force in the universe is going that way, are we going to move in that direction or, be pushed? A bit like, the pains and suffering I went through. It was such a big nudge for me to go in a certain direction. So there's a divine plan, and I know that we're all here because we have to contribute to this divine plan. We're here for this purpose, no matter what. And if we resist, it's going to be painful. Like my Taurus stubbornness, it got painful at a certain stage. So we need to participate in this, and we need to always see that there's a greater good in everything. Like my experience with my daughter having ME, it could have been viewed in such a negative way. But when you realize that even something we may perceive as evil or negative, it's all supported by the divine. And whatever it is used for us to go to the direction we need to go. Our soul forgets, we forget our soul mission. So we get a lot of reminders, knocks in the head everywhere to remind our mission. So as long as we understand there's a divine plan, it needs to be achieved, and we are helpers, we are people who've been invited by the divine to come for this thing, this great thing that's going to happen, unbelievable experience for us to have a heavenly world, and believe in ourselves that we are able to do this for the greater good of humanity and this amazing universe.
Well, we're all totally on board with that.
Yes.
We're all looking at our divine spreadsheet and
Yeah.
checking what's on our plan and checking what's on our tasks.
Yes.
So we're all on board with that for sure. There's an invitation for us to radiate together collectively as a constellation, to humanity and to water, to bring us into more conscious alignment.
Yes, and I think that's amazing but yes, the water side is very, very important, because it's something that connects us so completely, all humanity. We have reached a point where we've entered the photon belt. I think I was showing this graphic to Dhiraj one time about how our part of the solar system in the dark ages, the Kali Yuga, was below a certain threshold. We've come up to a level where the galactic central sun is more charging our sun and giving us this high energy, high light in our universe. But the water needs that energy. The water really needs it. So we need to be the instruments to help water to reach its higher potential.
Yeah, to transmit, radiate through our energy.
Yes.
And connect it all together.
When we meet people, and it could be past life connections, we create spiritual cords. So through spiritual cords that we are connecting right now, I will definitely be there through my spiritual cord.
Yeah.
Well, it's down to the divine. The divine wills you to be there. May we just spend a minute or two now, just silently, with our intention to connect our being with the water and with earth and with the sun. It seems quite appropriate, given that it's a strawberry moon tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much for joining us, Sally. We'll have more information about your company and your products that we'll post on our website, and so people can really enjoy and utilize this wonderful gift you've given to humanity.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Lorna and Dhiraj. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.